In this video, I go over how to build a Wookiee fursuit. Hi, I'm Brent. I'll be referencing this visual guide throughout the video. If you want a copy for yourself, it'll be linked down in the description with all the tools and materials I used. The process of building this fursuit was not what I expected, and it'll probably surprise you too. So let's go to past Brent to see how this thing was built. Back in early 2017, I did the research and I found that most people who make these Chewbacca costumes make a net set of pajamas and then hand tie thousands of locks of hair onto the net. If this sounds tedious, you'd be right. The movie costumes were hand knit, and so you'd have a chunky knit pants and a chunky knit shirt, and then they hand tied on the locks of hair from that. Why didn't I do this? Well, first, I didn't know how to knit, and two, I live in LA and didn't want to die of heat stroke. Instead, I made the suit out of this net fabric. It is a black, I think, polyester fabric. You can find it in the utility sections of Joann's. But I'm pretty sure you can order it online too at a bunch of different places. So how did I sew it? The pattern that I used for this was a McCall's pajama pattern that I've linked down below and you can see here. The pattern I had to, like everything else I sew, had to add length to it. So I added length in the pants legs as well as I added length in the sleeves. Everyone is going to have to add length in all of those places, no matter if you're as tall as me or not. And the reason is because Chewies are really tall. If you're going to be doing a version that is going to need stilts, you're probably going to want to do separate pieces for the stilts and then the rest of the pant legs, just so that it's easier to detach and attach and easier to get on. But for the rest of us, you'll just need a regular pair of pajamas that you're going to sew out of this net fabric, except everything is going to be longer. You should definitely sew with a zigzag stitch for this. I had a hard time getting a straight stitch to work with this fabric, and you might want to go over it twice for all of your seams to add a bunch of strength to it, because with the hair on, this is going to have a lot of weight on it. Note, I do wear suspenders with these pants. The pants weigh a decent amount because of the fur, and the suspenders really help keep the pants up as well as distribute the weight. Under the net fabric fursuit that I wear Under Armour, and I make sure they're moisture wicking because you're probably going to be sweating buckets under this. No, you really are going to be sweating buckets under this. The costume isn't that bad because it's made of a net fabric. As long as you have a wind or you keep moving around, you'll get some airflow through it, and it's more than you would ever expect. Once I had the pajamas figured out, I needed to figure out the hair. Most people make their Chewbacca costumes out of fake hair. The fake hair that I used are these Q Kanekalon jumbo braids, and to get a more realistic hair color, most people mix the hair. Mine is mixed between these two sets of colors. There is number 27 and number 613 to get this dirty blonde, and then it's 51 and 4 to get this gray brown. A lot of Wookiee builders use the same type of fake hair, so there's some commonly suggested mixing ratios of the different colors. But what I noticed is that the Force Awakens Chewbacca is a lot lighter and a lot different in color than the rest of the Chewbaccas that we've seen in the previous movies. And so I knew that I had to mix my own hair ratios. And so I spent a bunch of time figuring out what the right color ratios was, in my opinion. I did a bunch of testing, and here's a picture of some of the tests that I did. I eventually decided to do a mixing ratio of 1 part 613 and 4 parts 27 to get this blonde. And then for the gray, I did a 1 part 51 and a 1 part 4. So how do you mix the hair? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to cut it to the length you want to use it with. I usually cut it to about double the length that I want it to be when it's hanging. So if I want it to hang down 8 inches, then I'll cut a 16-inch section of hair. A lot of these braids come crimped, which means it's got this like zigzag pattern to it. So you want to straighten the hair out before you actually do the mixing. It'll make it a lot easier. I found the easiest way to do this is to get a hair straightener and put it on its lowest heat setting, and then just do a couple of quick passes on it until you're happy with it. Then you can mix the hair by hand. You can do this by just taking the colors that you're mixing and then split in half, and then put it all back together into both hands, and then split that big bundle in half again, and you can keep doing this until you get it mixed as much as you want. That's a really slow method, but it works. I then found out about a tool that can help with this, and it's called a hackle. No, it is not a medieval torture device as much as it looks like it. It is kind of looks like a bed of nails, and it kind of is. So what is a hackle? A hackle is a tool most commonly used to comb out fiber. When I originally found out about this tool, I went online to see if I could buy one, and it turns out they're like over $100 online, and I didn't want to pay for that. So I ended up getting a scrap piece of wood from a hardware store and then buying a bunch of nails. I then drew out a grid on the piece of wood and drilled out holes a little bit smaller than the size of the nail through the entire piece of the wood for each of the places that the marks intersected, and then I just hammered in a bunch of nails until they were all sticking out at the same length. And here's a close-up of what the final thing looks like. So this probably costs me less than $10, so if you're going to need a hackle, I'd suggest you just make one yourself. Oh, but make sure that you get a really smooth piece of wood. You don't want a really like rough piece of wood, or else the hair is going to get caught in the wood, and that just does not help. Before I go into how to use the hackle, I need to say, please be careful. This is a ton of nails, and while using the hackle, I have definitely multiple times bloodied up my knuckles and just generally hurt myself on it. So be safe. Let's get to the demonstration. Okay, so we are going to be mixing up some hair today. The color that we're going to be mixing up is the grayish brown that is used around a lot of Chewy. This is specifically going to be for the back of the head. Okay, so I need 2 feet of hair. Let's open up the hair and get it out. You want to save the hair ties. The hair ties are super useful because you can wrap up a bunch of hair in them. So I am looking at this, and it looks like these jumbo braids are 4 feet long. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut them in half. That'll give me the 24 inches that I need. They don't have to be like super exact, but you want them to be close. Cool. Now we have 2 24-inch chunks of hair in both colors. So I'm just gonna toss one of each of them away because we're only gonna deal with one for the moment. And then I am going to roughly split them in half. This doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, that's split in half. We are going to split these in half one more time. We're going to do the same thing with the other one. Roughly split it in half. Doesn't have to be exact, but you want to get close. The reason I'm doing this is because when you're actually mixing the hair, it's really hard to deal with large quantities, and so I am splitting them up into fours so that you can more easily mix those chunks. So I'm going to do the same thing with the black, or the dark brown. Split it first in half, clip, and then split this one in half. These clips are super useful for keeping the hair bundles together. I'm going to put aside all but two of the hair bundles, one of each of the colors, so that we can just focus on one at a time. So now we have our hair prepped and ready. This color, so the brownish gray, is a 1-to-1 mixture of the dark brown and the gray, and so we can just take the 1/4 sections that we pulled out and we can just mix them in equal quantities. What we're going to do is we're going to take the clips off, and then we are going to just put them on top of each other. And this is where you use the hackle, and this is where you need to be safe. And so you're going to be whipping the hair into the hackle, but you need to make sure that you keep your hands as far away from the hackle as you can, because you don't want to run your hand at high speed against the hackle. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to whip the hair into the hackle and pull it. Whip and pull, whip and pull. And as you can see, it starts to mix the hair for you. And then what I do is I grab the other side and then I start whipping it through from the other side. You're going to lose a little bit of hair. That's just how it is. You can pull it out, but yeah, you keep switching sides, and you can do a little bit of hand mixing yourself to help it along. But yeah, you just whip it through. And then switch to the other side, and you keep doing this until it is fully mixed. It's really up to you when you stop. I mean, to me, this looks good. This looks mixed. And let's compare it to what we started with. So we started with a gray and the dark brown, and here is the mixture that we got. This doesn't have to be 100% perfectly mixed. You'll see if you actually look at people's hair that there might be little streaks of hair that are all the same color together, and just being able to see a little bit of that, I think, adds a little bit of realism to your work. But yeah, since I've got a finished bundle, I'm just going to clip it and put it aside. And now that we have a good example of what the mixed grayish brown looks like, I'm going to do the exact same process for the blonde. These ones in the dirty blonde, I'm going to be doing at a different length. So I like to work with 16 inches at a minimum when I'm mixing. Any smaller than that, and it's harder for me to do the mixing. I'm going to cut down the hair if I need to go any shorter than that. We have cut our locks of the brown and the blonde. We're going to mix it so that it is 1 part blonde to 4 parts of the brown. And so what I'm going to roughly do is I'm going to roughly mix these two by hand just to get it started. So I'm just going to split it roughly in half, and then like roughly in half one more time. And like with the last one, we're just going to be flipping it every time after a couple of strokes. With these shorter ones, you're going to want to be careful about not running your hand into the hackle. And it always feels like the blonde and the brown take a lot longer to mix than the dark brown and the gray, and I can only guess that's just because like there's a larger contrast difference in between the two colors. So like the blonde is a lot closer to white than the brown is. Okay, I think that's good enough. So as you can see, it's mostly mixed there. And so I'm gonna do that for all 3 of the sections that I have, and we'll come back. And with that, it's mixed together. One thing that you can see is that I pulled some of the extra hair that was stuck in the hackle off and just put it into the mixed stuff. You can do that with some of the hair, but a lot of the hair is just too knotted for it to really easily be for you to do that again. So I honestly just clear the hackle of whatever is left after I pulled the easy ones, and then I call it a day. With that, we have our 2 example mixes of the colors that we actually use on the Force Awakens Chewbacca suit. And when I go about doing this, I do a lot because you kind of want to be attaching the hair all at once, and it takes a lot longer if you switch between mixing the colors and then attaching the hair. You kind of just want to do one and then focus on that and get a lot of it done and then switch to the other. That saves you a bunch of time. And now on to latch hooking. So what is latch hooking? Latch hooking is a technique for tying fiber onto net. It's most commonly used with yarn for making rugs. In our case, we're going to be using fake hair. So let's do some latch hooking. Here is the latch hook that I'm going to be using. It has 2 different kind of parts to it that are useful to know about. There is the hook end, and then there is the little latch. That's why it's called a latch hook, is there is this latch here. And that latch allows us to do a specific motion with the fiber that we're going to be using, which is the hair, to allow us to tie it onto the net. So let's get started. So we're going to take the hair and we are going to take just a tiny bit of it. It's really hard to describe how much this is, but you just want a really tiny part, and I will put up a good close-up of how much hair this is. And here's the technique. I'm going to do it twice for you. Put it around the latch hook, open the latch, put the hair through the hole that we want, get the latch through, wrap the hair around the hook, pull so that the latch closes, and then you can pull it all the way through, and you can see it makes a knot. I'll do that one more time. So we're going to take the hair that we want. We're going to roughly find the halfway point, open the latch, find where we want it to go. I'm going to pick here, push it all the way through, grab the hair with the other hand, make sure not to grab the other hair, and then we're going to wrap it around between the latch and the hook. We're going to pull so that the latch closes, and then we are going to hold the net and pull back. And we end up with a nice knot. And that is how you latch hook. You do this over and over and over until you cover the entire suit. So one of the questions you might be asking yourself is, how densely should I be tying these latch hooking knots? Well, what I can tell you is that on the tops of the shoulders and the tops of the arms, you're going to have a lot more density than you'll want on the bottom of the arms or in the armpits or just about anywhere else on the suit. And that is because when you raise your arms, the hair is going to generally fall down, and it limits the amount of cover that's on the top. So you need a lot of density to make it so that you don't see the net. because you really don't want that. That breaks the illusion. And conversely, under the arm, you don't want to have a lot of density, or at least you don't need to have a lot of density, because the hair is going to be falling down and it's going to be covering up the bottom. You especially don't want very much density in the armpits because it just adds bulk and makes it uncomfortable. Here's the density from the middle of the chest where you can see it's not very dense. And here's an example of the density on the top of the arm where you can see it's a lot more dense. Let's talk hair length. So the vast majority of the suit has a hair length from the knot to the tip of 8 inches. What that really means is that you're going to be cutting locks of hair that are 16 inches because you fold the hair over when you knot it. The only place that doesn't have 8-inch long hair on the suit is around the lower stomach area. And the reason for that is that I originally had it at 8 inches, but the problem is you have the shirt overlapping the pants. And what that did is it created a lot of density in this lower stomach area, which made Chewbacca look like he had a larger stomach than I wanted him to. And so I wanted this area to be more flat. And so I needed less density. So what you want to do is for this area here, you will want to use those 24-inch length locks. Next, we need to talk about color changes. It took me a really long time to hone in on where the colors needed to change on my suit. To get my suit to be as close to the one from the movie, I took photos of mine and then overlaid them on top of screen captures from the movie and compared them. And that told me where I needed to make adjustments. So if I have 8-inch locks, that means from where I knot it to where it falls is 8 inches. So that means that when you do a color change, you need to do it 8 inches above where you actually see the color change. To make it easier on you, here's a diagram of where I did the color changes on my suit. So if you want to replicate it, I also have a link to the diagram down below in the description. So a question you might be asking is, how many hours did it take for me to latch hook this entire suit? Well, just adding the hair, I stopped counting after 200 hours. If I had to guess, it probably took me between 300 and 400 hours, but I'm not 100% sure. I had to slow down how long I was latch hooking every day because I started to feel like my hand and my wrist were getting carpal tunnel syndrome. Please take your time. It's not worth impacting your health to make the costume done a little bit faster. Most of the time I spent latch hooking, I didn't do it at a desk. I spent it on a couch watching some of my favorite TV shows and movies. I also took it to meetups with friends because people were curious and I wanted to get more done on the costume. It definitely was a conversation starter. When I finished latch hooking, I didn't nail the density. I had too much hair on the suit, so I used 2 different tools to be able to deal with that. The first is thinning shears. They are these scissors that you can see that have slots in them. You don't want to cut perpendicular to the hair. It will make blunt ends and it'll make it so that you can see where you cut. What you want to do is you want to cut at an angle that makes it blend into the suit a lot more. The second tool that I used was a hair razor. This was very useful for thinning the density at the ends of the locks of hair. You just run the razor down the hair and it will take out hair as it goes. One of the final touches that you can use to add that much more realism to the suit is curling it. I used a regular curling iron on its lowest heat setting. You're going to want to test on some extra hair not on the suit first to make sure that you have the heat setting correct, because the last thing that you want to do is melt a bunch of hair onto the suit and have to take it out. Also make sure to do some tests with the size of the curling wand. I had to go through 3 or 4 different sizes to find the one that worked best for me. It took me around 9 or 10 hours to curl the entire suit. I used these metal clips throughout to be able to hold the hair out of the way while I was curling the suit. When you're done curling, you're going to want to brush it out with a wig comb. This is a special comb that is used for wigs and is made to not pull hair out. Combing it out with the comb will make the suit look more lived in. So with curling taking 9 or 10 hours to do, is it worth it? I 100% think it's worth it. And the curls last a long time because the nice part with working with fake hair is that it's plastic and that it retains the heat set that you get from curling very well. This suit, I have washed in warm water in the bathtub before, and it still retains its curls. And we're finally done. I'm very proud of how my fursuit came out. I think the colors really match the movie one very well. I also think that my costume has one of the closest matching silhouettes I've seen in a Wookiee costume. If you want a copy of the visual guide, it's linked down in the description with all the tools and materials I used. I'm going to be releasing videos for the rest of the costume, so if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and let's go see the final result.